Hey, Merry Christmas everybody, this is Dillawong here, and today I'm going to review the third and last Hobbit film, The Battle of the Five Armies. Now I am a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings franchise. I read all the Lord of the Rings books and even watched the Lord of the Rings animated film made by Ralph Bakshi, and the animated versions of The Hobbit and Return of the King, both made by Rick and Bass. While I think both the Ralph Bakshi and the Rick and Bass version was entertaining, but I felt those are forgettable. For the live-action Lord of the Rings trilogy directed by Peter Jackson, they are the best. Fellowship of the Rings was amazing, The Two Towers was wonderful, and The Return of the King was my favorite out of the entire trilogy. All three of Lord of the Rings films has wonderful story and acting, great characters, amazing battle sequences, mind-blowing special effects, and very emotional. So I've been waiting for the prequel, The Hobbit, ever since after Peter Jackson finished filming his 2005 remake of King Kong. At first it was split into two, but much to my surprise, he decided to make it as a trilogy. Now I loved the first Hobbit film, The Unexpected Journey. I thought it was fantastic, even though not as amazing as the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. It brings back the good old memories of Middle-earth, great battle sequences, and introduced interesting characters. I also enjoyed the scene where Bilbo Baggins was playing riddles with Gollum. The second Hobbit film, Desolation of Smaug, I love it even more. It had more battle scenes, became much darker, and I really do love the evil dragon, Smaug. Now I'm excited to see the third and final Hobbit film. Originally it was going to be called There and Back Again, however, they decided to call it The Battle of the Five Armies to make it more interesting. So I became more and more excited to see this film when I saw the trailers, the TV spots, and the posters. Now that I finally saw it with my uncle in IMAX 3D, what do I think of it? This is one of the best movies I ever saw this year! It is also my favorite of the entire trilogy. Now I'm going to tell you why I love this movie with no spoilers. Let's start with the story. The story is where Desolation of Smaug left off. It starts off where Smaug attacked Lake Town. Bard the Bowman broke out of prison and killed Smaug with the last black arrow. After Smaug's death, Thorin and his fellow dwarves finally reclaim the Lonely Mountain, and the survivors of Lake Town have chosen Bard as their new leader. Even though Thorin had brought back the Lonely Mountain, he later changed into a different person and felt angry that he and his fellow dwarves couldn't find the Arkenstone. However, it was revealed that Bilbo Baggins has stolen the Arkenstone the whole time. Meanwhile, Galadriel, Elrond, Saruman, and Radagast all came to rescue Gandalf, fight the Ring Rice, and knows Sauron has returned. So Radagast has taken Gandalf to safety, while Saruman had told both Galadriel and Elrond to leave and wants to face Sauron himself. Back in the Lonely Mountain, at first Thorin does not trust men and elves, but suddenly Oslog and his armies of orcs and goblins has come to take over the Lonely Mountain and wants to destroy the humans, elves, and dwarves. So Bilbo, Gandalf, and the armies of men, elves, and dwarves had decided to team up together to protect the Lonely Mountain and fight Oslog and his armies of orcs and goblins, and that's where the excitement begins. I actually think the story of this film was wonderful. Along with The Unexpected Journey and The Desolation of Smaug, it took place 60 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Peter Jackson, his wife Fran Wells, and Philpal Boyan all did a great job writing the story of this film as always. All the three Hobbit films was also written by another one of my favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro, best known for directing Chronos, Mimic, Blade 2, Hellboy 1 and 2, Pan's Labyrinth, and Pacific Rim. Guillermo del Toro also did a great job writing the story of this film. I could see the reason why they call it The Battle of the Five Armies. Now let's talk about the special effects and action scenes. The special effects in this film are as amazing as the original Lord of the Rings and the first two Hobbit films. The CGI of those creatures are very creative and realistic. I love the motion captures of Smaug, Azog, and the rest of the orcs and goblins. I also enjoy the makeups, the costume designs, the landscape, and the weapons. As for the action scenes, they are very brutal, exciting, and intense. I really enjoy the battle sequences as I did with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and the first two Hobbit films. It was very cool to see the armies of men, elves, and dwarves against the armies of orcs and goblins. Now for the acting, directing, and music. Let's start with the young Bilbo Baggins, played by Martin Freeman. He did an excellent job playing a young Bilbo Baggins, as he did in the first two Hobbit films. This young Bilbo Baggins starts off as a peaceful and happy person until Gandalf and the dwarves came to visit him and decided to join them on a journey. Later on, he became a fighter and used the ring from the original trilogy, which he stole from Gollum. He actually did as amazing as Ian Holmes, which he played older Bilbo Baggins from the original trilogy. Then there's the leader of the dwarves, Thorin, played by Richard Armitage. He did an amazing job playing Thorin, as he did in the first two Hobbit films. His character Thorin was a very tough guy and wants to take back the Lonely Mountain from Smaug and fight his old enemy, Azog. I felt that the relationship between Thorin and Bilbo was very strong and emotional, like the friendship between Frodo and Sam. Other dwarves like Dwalin, played by Graham McTraffis, Balin, played by Ken Stute from Chronicles of Narnia Prince Caspian, Kili, played by Aidan Turner, Fili, played by Dean O'Gorman, Dory, played by Mark Handlow, who was from Peter Jackson's King Kong, Nori, played by Gene Borfrey, Ori, played by Adam Brown, Olin, played by John Callan, Glorin, played by Peter Hambleton, Belfer, played by William Keirher, Bolfer, played by James Neesett, and Bumbar, played by Stephen Hunter. All did a great job playing those characters as they did in the first two Hobbit films. As for Thorin's cousin Dane, played by Billy Connolly, who has been in movies like The Last Samurai, Limited Snickers, A Series of Unfortunate Events, and Pixar's Brave, did awesome as well. Now for the elves. Thorandrel, played by Lee Pace, and Thalorel, played by Evan Legline. Lily, who is from Real Steel. Both did a great job playing those characters. Now even though Thalorel was not a character from the book, I think she's one of the most awesome female fighters ever, along with Xena the Warrior Princess, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Susan from the Chronicles of Narnia franchise, and that dragon lady from Game of Thrones. I also enjoyed the love relation between her and that dwarf Kili. Now for Bart the Bowman, played by Luke Evans. This guy was awesome and becomes one of my favorite characters of this franchise. Now for Radagast, played by Sylvester McCoy. I think he was funny in my opinion. He's pretty much as funny as Jeremy the Crow from Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim. Others returning from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, like Gandalf, played by Ian McKellen, Galadriel, played by Kate Blanchett, Orin's father Erod, played by Hugo Weaving, also best known for playing the evil Agent Smith in the Matrix trilogy, Red Skull in Captain America, as well as voicing the dog Rex in Babe, that old penguin in Happy Feet, and Megatron in the first three Michael Bay's Transformers films. Legolas, played by Orlando Bloom, who was from the first three Pirates of the Caribbean films as Will Turner, Troy as Prince Paris, and Kingdom of Heaven as Balin the Blacksmith. And Saruman, played by Christopher Lee, who was best known as Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy in the Hammer horror films, Count Dooku from the last two Star Wars prequels, and one of the James Bond villains, as well as the Tim Burton's films like Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, and Alice in Wonderland. All did a great job as well. Both Legolas and Saruman never appear in the Hobbit book, but they're still awesome. Now for the villains, Smaug and Sauron, both played by Benedict Cumberbatch from Steven Spielberg's Warhorse as Major James, Star Trek Into Darkness as Khan, and 12 Years a Slave as William, Azog played by Manuel Bennett, and Azog's son, Bolog, played by John Toohey, all did a wonderful job. Peter Jackson did a fantastic job directing this film, as he did with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and the first two Hobbit films. Last but not least, the music composed by the guy who did the music for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and the first two Hobbit films, Howard Shore, who also did music for other films like the 1986 remake of The Fly, Silence of the Lamb, Mrs. Doubtfire, Philadelphia, The Client, Ed Wood, Seven, Copland, Analyze This, Gangs of New York, and The Departed. The music for this film was beautiful and epic to listen to. The song, The Last Goodbye, sang by the guy who played Pippin from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Billy Boyd, was a wonderful song. While not as beautiful as May It Be, sang by Enya from Fellowship of the Ring, and Into the West, sang by Annie Lennox from The Return of the King, but it's just as fun as Song of the Lonely Mountain from The Unexpected Journey and I See Fire from Desolation of Smaug. So overall, this is the best movie I saw this year. I love this movie more than The Unexpected Journey, and I love this movie the same way I loved the original Lord of the Rings trilogy and Desolation of Smaug. It was the best franchise finale I ever saw since Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 and The Dark Knight Rises. I also love this movie the same way I love other movies this year like Godzilla and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So I give this movie a 5 out of 5 nuclear bombs. If you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings books, fantasy movies, and action movies, go see it. Well, this is the last time we will ever visit Middle-earth. The Hobbit trilogy may not be as amazing as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I will say, I loved the Hobbit trilogy more than the Star Wars prequel trilogy. One more thing I'd like to say before I go. Peter Jackson, thank you for bringing us this wonderful franchise, and J.R.R. Tolkien should be proud of you. And that's the way it is.